Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is Paul Rocchio at the International Franchise Association. Again, we would like to just thank you all. Today's presentation is part of IFA's 2021 Economic Outlook webinar series. It's based around the newly released 2021 Economic Outlook on Franchising report, and today we'll focus on the lodging sector. Two quick notes before we get started. We are recording today's webinar and it will be made available on IFA's later this evening on IFA's microsite, community.franchise.org. And if you have any questions for our speakers today, please add them to the question box and we'll address those towards the end of today's webinar. So thank you. So today's purpose is to give you an overview of the report findings specifically for the lodging sector, and then you'll hear from your peers within the sector on where they see the franchising economy going and how they are working to come out stronger than ever. For a high-level overview of the full report, you can view the recording of our May 18th series kickoff webinar at community.franchise.org on our microsite. But here are a few of the key points to note in the Fran data findings. Fran data predicts that by year end, franchising will have recovered to nearly 2019 levels in most metrics: business growth, employment, economic outlook, and contribution to GDP. Franchising is expected to experience the highest upswing of franchise sales since the last recession. So that's always a positive note. Now, specifically for the lodging sector, while a full pre-pandemic recovery for the entire sector isn't expected until 2023, there's a silver lining. There will be some great growth. For example, franchise establishments in this sector are expected to grow at a rate of 2.9% in 2021 to almost 28,000 establishments. Franchise employment in the sector is expected to add up to over 111,000 jobs, supporting more than 557,000 workers overall. As well as domestic output is expected to increase by 61.2% over 2020 to about $66 billion. So there is, some silver lining there, as I had mentioned. So these are great predictions for the sector and a lot to work towards. So on that note, I'd like to introduce the lodging sector professionals who have kindly joined us today to talk a little bit more about their perspective on the franchise economy within the sector. So today we have David Pepper, Chief Development Officer at Choice Hotels International, and Amma Romain, General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer at G6 Hospitality. So thank you both for joining us today, David and Amma. And to get started, I'd like each of you to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your systems that you're involved with. So Amma, let me start with you, please. Please take it away.
I was going to tell you you're supposed to start with David.
In that case. David, it's you now. Ladies first.
Okay, so I'm, as you said, I'm the General Counsel at G6 Hospitality. We're the parent company for Motel 6 and Studio 6, our extended stay brand. We own a little over 1,400 franchises, we own and manage and franchise a little over 1,400 hotels across the United States and Canada. And we are an owner-operator as well as franchisor.
Excellent, excellent. And David.
Thank you. First of all, Paul, I love the picture from earlier. It's must have been like last week you took that picture.
Exactly.
I'm David Pepper. I'm the Chief Development Officer at Choice Hotels. We are over 7,000 hotels around the world with 13 brands. We're kind of in 4 segments. We're in upscale with Cambria and Ascend. And then we're also in the mid-scale segment our largest being comfort and quality. We're in the economy segment with Econo Lounge and Roadway, and then also an extended stay pretty heavily with Woodspring, Suburban, and Mainstay. And we just launched a new Everhome brand as well last year. Been with the company for 19 years, been in franchising for, shockingly, it was 30 years last month.
Wow.
So I love this business. But really happy to be here. Thanks.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both. So now, David, I just read off some pretty, I thought, pretty positive stats for the sector this year. So can you tell us, how do you personally view the economic outlook for the lodging sector? Would love to start with you, please.
Sure. Look, you saw from the stats, things are, the green shoots are there, right? We all see it. We all see some real positive motions going forward. It's a little uneven. Look, probably Ama and I with our brands, Ama being purely economy, most of our brands being mid-scale and below, we didn't have the down as much as some of the other segments in the business. Think more luxury and think about convention, urban center, convention hotels, where conventions just shut down. Most urban centers shut down. So they were hurt most. Ama and myself, more of our mid-scale and economy segments, those are drive-to hotels. Anybody that was getting out, anywhere they were going, they had to drive by one of our hotels. So they stayed at our hotels on the way there to go see their people. So we never really got the downturn as much as some of the other segments. But with that, we are seeing, look, some really great upticks since the vaccines have come out and seeing a plateau of cases out there. So we're seeing some really good opportunities going forward. One of the segments that have performed the best is extended stay. Most people that did travel, they wanted a kitchen. Most people that did go somewhere, they went for 30 days. They went for 60 days to get away and they can work from home. So our extended stay brands like Woodspring and Mainstay, I mean, in January, we were actually up in revenue versus 2019 for those brands.
Wow.
So you can really see the extent they really showed a strong resiliency. And what you're seeing a lot from people, and we can talk later about where we see the opportunities going forward, but it seems like everybody now wants to have an extended stay hotel in their hotel portfolio. Because
it's a good problem to have, right?
Right. It's, because even when things do come back, if we ever see something else come back like this again, they're going to want to have an extended stay hotel in their portfolio to balance out their portfolio going forward. So again, I think I would agree. We really see really good we see some really good opportunities going forward. We see some good performance levels, and then from the franchising side, you're going to see some real growth as well.
Awesome. Thank you. And very insightful, David. And Ama, how are your thoughts, personally regarding the economic outlook for the lodging sector, and of course, for G6, for the G6 brands as well?
Yeah, so I would echo what David just shared, and I think it's funny. One of the bullets that I wrote down, he said it almost verbatim, right? Which is the importance of having a diverse portfolio. I think was probably what this period underscored, right? So I think people who did not have limited service or economy lodging or extended stay in their portfolios are seeing that there's value in having those types of brands. Even at this time when consumer preferences are changing and people want less interaction, and the limited service model does actually offer that. So we were, just sort of unexpectedly well primed for what people needed in this time, right? So even things that that you're probably seeing less of as we move forward with fewer exterior corridor hotels, at a time when people would rather just drive up and drive into a room, those types of things actually lent comfort, I think, to people at a time when they were looking for a slightly different stay experience than what we had become used to when we were sort of moving toward like the lobby bar, right? Like the hotel being the space where you congregate and gather. And look, I think it's a pendulum. I think it will come back over time, but I think this really just underscores the importance of having a diverse portfolio.
No, exactly. And I know we're going to touch on this a little later regarding operational changes, but it didn't occur to me that it's like basically kind of pre-planning for the next God forbid, for the next pandemic. Like you said, the extended stay. I'm just curious whether any of your franchisees, for example, who are I try not to use the word pivot on a daily basis, but it always comes up. David, were some of them kind of on the fence about extended stay, and then all of a sudden now they're just like kind of jumping into it head first? Was that what you experienced?
We're definitely seeing that. We saw it right before the pandemic when we bought Woodspring Suites. Look, it's a great prototype. It's a great operating model with great return proposition for developers. But we also proved that when we bought the brand, we also sold 100 to Brookfield, 100 corporate assets. So there's also a proven exit with institutional capital. And so we started to see some institutional capital really have an interest in extended stay. Now every institutional capital wants to get into extended stay. I mean, look at the potential ESA acquisition that's going on today with Blackstone and Starwood Capital. So I think this downturn really did prove out the extended stay model. And so you are seeing a lot of institutional capital and a lot of just developers with a lot of interest of, I want to have extended stay. It's a proven model. And you're right, to Ama's point, it's a great diversified asset to have in your portfolio.
Yeah.
Excellent. Let's move on to the next question here. How are your franchisees responding as business picks back up? Luxury brands ramp back up to full service. What are you both doing? What are your brands doing to keep them engaged and moving forward with opportunities? Ama, if I could maybe start with you, please.
Sure. So, as David alluded to, we our brands, even at the lowest point of the pandemic, our brands performed really well. So we had customers throughout. There were parts of the economy that continued to operate even when everything was shut down, right? I mean, Amazon still kept showing up at your home. You still got groceries. In order for those things to happen, people have to be on the road. They need places to stay. So there's some businesses that really continue to operate, and ours was one of them. And so, in that time, our focus, I think there was a real desire on the part of franchisees for information, right? People really wanted information. They needed to understand the landscape, the operating landscape, what the restrictions were in operations, what the changes were. They needed to make in short order, because I think the pace of change was pretty rapid, I think, in the regulatory environment. But the thing that we sort of really narrowed in on focusing on guest and team member safety and security. And we felt like if that was our North Star, you could probably withstand all of the variations, right? I mean, everyone was that, ultimately that was the focus. How do you keep people safe at a time when people don't feel safe or don't really even fully understand how to keep themselves safe? And so for us, the protocols that we put in place, for the most part, there wasn't a lot that we had to take away, because we don't have a lot of the extras built into our business model. We are pretty lean, mean operating machine. Mm-hmm. But we really doubled down on the things that we knew mattered to people, right? On the cleaning and on the safety, frankly, on not going into people's rooms as frequently, right? Because people want less contact. And I think some of those things, they're real questions, I think, about, how long that will last. I mean, I just traveled recently, and I think my preference was, I was pretty comfortable with no one coming into my room for the time that we were there, right? I mean, it just felt, I felt like I had a little bit more control. So I think that's something that you might see extend a little longer, and probably throughout different segments, right? I don't think it's going to be limited to limited service.
No, I could not agree more, and thank you. And David, what are your thoughts?
So I kind of look at two different areas, one being operational and one being, franchisee opportunity. And in regards to operations, I agree with Amma. Number one, and the first thing we were all focused on was cleanliness. Do we have a good cleanliness program? Do we have the employees trained at the properties to ensure the cleanliness and making people feel safe while they're traveling? The big issue right now we have with franchisees is they can't get their employees back. And that is a big problem right now with the stimulus checks and also with the unemployment insurance extended. We're having a little bit of trouble. I've talked to many franchisees of how to get the employees back into the hotel. And so I think I'm seeing that not just in our industry, I'm seeing that in a lot of industries.
Yes.
Where that has really become an issue. It's interesting, luckily, in some of our hotel owners, they kind of have clusters of hotels. So we're starting to see them kind of, I wouldn't say gig economy, but they're kind of using some of their employees, like they have 50 employees, let's say, and wherever they need them, they're starting to push them around the different one of their hotels.
Oh,
So they're
wow.
not just working at one hotel. So I think it's a very creative idea operationally, but also to help solve that issue of, I can't get my employees back. So that's one thing operationally that we're concerned about. But in regards to the franchisee opportunity, look, what we're seeing with our franchisees is the banks are starting to say, okay, I'm done, right? We already gave forbearance. We've worked with you. There's no light at the end of the tunnel, so we'll work with you. We don't want the hotel back. We don't want the cash burn to keep the hotel operating. And so the banks have been very, very lenient for that 1 year into the pandemic. Well, now, like what we just talked about was we're starting to see some green shoot. We're starting to see some, light at the end of the tunnel. And now the banks are starting to be like, it's time to put some money up. And so I think, look, that's really bad. It's bad for some franchisees. Some people are going to start realizing that they might have, there is no more equity in the hotel. But what that also does is create opportunities, right? There are going to be hotels, some of these bigger boxes that we talked about, that they're ones that's going to take 2 or 3 years for them to come back. That you're starting to see the foreclosures pick up. You're starting to see some of the bankruptcies. You're starting to see the note sales. This is going to create opportunities for franchisees, though, to go out and buy some assets at a good price. And so I know it sounds terrible on one side, but it's also good for the other side of there will be some opportunities. And so that's where the franchisees are engaged. They're the ones that are the good sponsors that do have equity. They're looking. You've heard all the SPACs and you've heard all the funds. I mean, the vultures are at the door. I mean, there's a lot of money that has been raised to go out and buy real estate. And so there will be opportunities. And so that's what we're working a lot too with our franchisees, of working through those opportunities where they can go in, whether it be a white knight, whether buy some notes, whether buy some assets, where they can take some of these assets that were underperforming and then convert to one of our brands potentially. And also, so they have a story for the bank. That's the biggest thing the banks need right now, and they're finally seeing it. It was, look, the banks were, a hotel loan was a 4-letter word, right? For quite some time, because we didn't have a story. And now they're starting to see the story. They're starting to see the increases in RevPAR in the revenue per available room. And they're starting to see that the banks are starting to see a story. So they're going to start opening up here as well for some lending to go out and do some projects. So coming out of any dark ash, hopefully there's a phoenix coming here, and there's some opportunity. And I think that's where the franchisees are starting to become much more engaged as well.
And when you say opportunity, is that in reference to resales, if you will, and not just like within your family of brands, but I thought I heard you say that they might purchase a distressed property or a location, but then convert over.
Exactly. What you're probably seeing is, I took a shot on a weaker brand, and now it didn't work out. So now is the time to either reposition to the stronger brands, or also it's an opportunity for someone to come in and buy those assets that didn't work out and reposition those to a stronger brand, which obviously is another story for the bank, besides just the growth opportunity, but also a repositioning that will create some opportunities for these owners.
And I would even add to that, that what we've seen is owners being able to capitalize on the success of the brand during this time period, right? So, I mean, I think where you have owners who are multi-unit owners in particular, who had pretty strong balance sheets. I mean, they really, even during the pandemic, were able to continue acquiring new hotels and continuing to grow their portfolio opportunistically during the last year.
Yeah, and for all the other franchisors that are out there as well, I mean, we've put together a whole deck that basically shows how well our extended stay brands performed during the pandemic. And when you go and take that to a bank, it's going to help you out much more so whether you're going to buy an asset or build a new extended stay hotel, to be able to put that in the hands of a banker or show a banker of how well you performed during the downturn.
Yeah.
So again, it is. I think it's create opportunities to grow our extended stay brands because of our past performance during this pandemic.
And obviously, I mean, this is safe to say it's common sense, but when I'm chatting with folks who don't quite understand franchising, I always like to tell them that there's so many different types of brands that use the business format franchise model, and you've got very low investment, home-based franchises, but then you've got, certain restaurant brands or the hotel brands, which are, it's not a cheap investment. But during the pandemic, it seems, though there have been some issues, with the SBA but at least, with this downturn in the economy, and unfortunately, there are quite a few folks out of work, but that's also, as we like to say in franchising, whenever unemployment is usually up over 4%, that usually ends up being a gold mine for franchise development. But is it safe to say that both of you that are your franchisees still able to have access to capital? I would imagine they all pretty much have good relationships with their bankers. But have there been many? I mean, I think you both kind of touched on it a little bit, but it seems like everybody's, the spigot isn't turned off like it was during the Great Recession of the mid 2000s, basically.
Go ahead, Anna.
I would say so in our segment, right? I mean, I don't think it's true across the board, and I don't think it's been universal, but I think in our segment, that's what we've seen. I mean, over the prior year, as I said, we own a significant part of our portfolio, and
yes.
So we were selling assets over the past year, and we're able to do that even during the pandemic. And so I think there were pockets of opportunity, and there were, people saw that this was a period, and they also had their own operations. David talked about the deck he put together, but a lot of these owners just saw the performance of their own hotels, and really felt like, that this was a really good time for them to double down on their investment.
Yeah, look, it was turned off for a while. I mean, I don't think many banks want to lend for hotels for a while. I think what you are seeing, or what you have been able to see, are sponsors that have experience. You weren't seeing a lot of new first-time hotel developers being able to come in and get a loan. They had to have some experience as a sponsor. Where we were getting 65% financing for a new construction hotel, it might have been 50. So the terms were a little bit different. Again, the banks didn't have a story, and so now they're starting to see it, and so it's starting to open up a little bit. I wouldn't say it's fully back on yet, but we are starting to see some opening up from the banks, and again, because the story is there, and so hopefully look, we saw this in China. We saw the huge increase in what happened once the doors were opened, and once the pandemic was over. We're starting to see that, right? I mean, we've all seen South Beach and spring break, and we're starting to see,
we'll start, game, apparently.
Yeah, we'll start sharing our, we're a public company, so we'll start sharing our numbers, after in next month or so. But as you see this increase in revenue, the banks will start opening back up. I mean, you haven't seen very much on the CMBS side yet from the hotel side. So you again, once things start picking up and you're going to start seeing the transactions pick up, the lending is going to be there.
Excellent. So let's move on to the next question. Were there any major system or operational changes you had to make in 2020 that you foresee continuing in the future? And I know I think you both kind of maybe touched on this a little bit. And also, on the flip side, any changes that you implemented that you may need to stop or remove when things get back to quote unquote normal. David, if I could start with you, I guess. Sure.
Look, we took this downturn to really focus on total cost of ownership. I know every franchisor and every franchisee business out there, it has gotten more expensive to run your business. With us, with search, keyword buys and, our partners at Expedia and other OTAs, it's gotten much more expensive to own and operate these assets. So we took this as a time of how can we help our owners lower the cost of operating the asset. So one of the things that Alma mentioned earlier was, this kind of housekeeping on demand, right? Once a room is clean, nobody wants anybody else coming back into the room. Plus, you were staying longer, which also meant your computer and your electronics are in there. And if you're out of the room, you don't want people in there playing around with your stuff. And plus, from a health and safety and cleanliness, people are like, if it's clean, leave me alone. It's my stuff. And so, but that was great for us, right? It's not only is it labor less intensive, but it's also cleaning supplies, washing sheets, things like that. So that was something that also lowered the cost for the owner but also something that the guests wanted. Second was continental breakfast, right? When I first got into the business, it used to be a cup of coffee and a muffin. Today it's the bacon and the eggs and the yogurt and it's become this massive continental breakfast, which is very expensive for the owners. Well, number one was everybody shut down for continental breakfast. You couldn't even do a buffet. Now imagine the savings for the owner. So going forward, we're looking at things like, should we get away from the big buffet and should it be one or two single sandwiches, maybe a hot sandwich and something cold? People only want prepackaged. So, can you get away with the eggs and the bacon and, so we're looking at things like that where how can we kind of lower that cost for the owner, but also maintain, that brand, for the guest that they're still satisfied with that. So that's kind of a lot of where we're focused on is really that total cost of ownership for our franchisees.
Excellent. Amma, how about you?
Yeah, I would say that that's always been one of our core operating principles, right? In terms of our operating model. I mean, that is sort of like the essence of where we've been. That's been our sweet spot. I think during the pandemic, what we really tried to focus on and what we brought our franchisees focus to was really making sure, David touched on this, right? Like cleanliness and making sure that people feel safe and really thinking about what is going to make the customer feel comfortable so that they want to stay and want to come back, right? You want your return guest. And so I think that for us, using that period to really double down on quality of service, and even if you're not going into a room, that's not a reason not to remain engaged, right? And not to know what's happening at your hotel and not to be available. So you use your team members differently. So yes, you don't need as many people to clean every single room, but you might be able to focus on some common areas and guardrails and things that people can see that just make them feel like this is a hotel that feels safe and clean and that is looking after the most important, making sure that I feel safe when I travel. So I think those types of things will matter. One of the, I think, unintended consequences of the pandemic is that, business travel was really discouraged, right? And if you are a franchisor, a big brand, and you have a lot of units across the country or around the world, I mean, you have to, at some point, you have to get there, right? Like you have to show up. And so I think while there was sort of less on-property presence by big brands, I think that will change, right? That has to evolve because we do have to stay focused, and that requires us being present. So for those reasons, it means travel has to come back, right? Because as long as these hotels are open, people have to start traveling. And for us, it really is focusing on just the basics, right? Guest safety, guest security, and cleanliness, and making sure that people feel safe when they show up at our properties.
Yeah, and to Alma's point, one of the things I think we all kind of cut during the pandemic was QA.
I'm sorry?
Quality
QA.
assurance.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Right, and so we had all kind of cut that. I think a lot of franchisors have cut that because a lot of us use third party for doing QA, and those businesses wouldn't travel, so you couldn't even send somebody to go to QA. Well, now that's starting to, that's opened up again. Now business, a little that travel it can be done. Where now we need to get back and implement QA again. We need to ensure that the brand standards are being in place. We need to ensure that the guest is having a good experience. And so, as much as a lot of franchisees did, it's really funny. A lot of our franchisees, our franchise advisory committees are like, you need to bring back QA.
Yeah.
we need to ensure that the brand is staying consistent. And so the franchisees have asked for this. I'm sure you get a lot of franchisees saying, "Oh, that's great. Don't bring it back." But the good franchisees, they're all asking for QA to come back, and that's one of the first things that need to come back as well after with this pandemic is we need to ensure that the brand standards are being kept up.
And that bodes well for all the legislation that's out there too, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we don't want to be, and we can't be held responsible for everything that's happening at our hotels, but these are our brands, and so we have to take care of the brand. We have to take care of the, make sure that the standards are being complied with.
No, exactly, and that really touches on the kind of the next part of this question. How are brand standard expectations changing as business gets back to normal? And I think you pretty much touched on it, both of you, but it's interesting. I mean, my family, we've only traveled outside of the DC area on very few occasions, and one was to drive one of our daughters to her freshman year of college in Ohio, and we did have to stay at a hotel. And full disclosure, it wasn't one of your two brands, but it was an IFA, another IFA member brand. But it was just very interesting to to see how things were being handled in Ohio, at least. The bar was open but limited service. I was able to get food, but they weren't delivering food to the room. I had to go down to the bar to pick it up. People were wearing masks or they weren't wearing masks, but I mean, personally, I felt safe. But also in the morning, breakfast was it was like a bag lunch. It was bag breakfast, and it was sitting there on a table, in the lobby, and then the team member basically poured me a cup of coffee. I was getting ready to go, it was behind the counter, and I just instinctively was going to do self-serve, and they were like, "Oh no, let me do that for you." And then it occurred to me, I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm the idiot, of course." And I just thought it was handled well. And then I think it was my daughter jokingly said, "This is probably the cleanest TV remote we're ever gonna find in a hotel." So yeah, and it was interesting to see, like a sticker on the door to prove that nobody had been in the room, but the room had been cleaned. It's like little things like that. And then I know, like, whenever I travel for for work for IFA, or at least at the IFA convention, because we're there for a long time. I mean, I just don't use room service. Or, you know, it's basically I turn my hotel into an office, and I just, you know, I just leave everything out, and I know that you could always, at least ahead of time, say, you know, if I don't need you know, the room cleaned, you know, I get like whatever, a reduction on my hotel stay. I don't know if that's, you know, common within the industry, or if that's something that that you all see being extended after the pandemic. Just curious.
Yeah, I think some of those are here to stay. I really do. And hopefully, Paul, you had a good experience, right? I mean, that's number one.
Oh yeah, I personally had a great experience. Yeah.
And what's amazing is less was more, right?
Yeah.
You didn't have the housekeeping every day. You didn't need it, and you didn't want it, right? You were fine with a, you know, with a bag for breakfast of, you know, a grab and go, which is, you know what, you
It's
felt
like banana
safer.
and yogurt, exactly.
Right. But it was individually wrapped.
Yeah.
You felt
But
safer.
yeah,
you felt cleaner. And at the end of the day, so the guest was happy, and the franchisee actually made more money. Right? Amazing. That less was more. And so those are the cuts that are the smart cuts. What we try to make sure also during the pandemic, though, is that you didn't cut your services to your franchisee, right? And so, like room sales, right? Make sure your global sales department was still out there, still trying to get business for your owners, right? I mean, we got some business during the pandemic that we had no right getting that business, and we literally asked the people, why are you staying with us? Why aren't you staying with this other brand? And they're like, because they didn't answer the phone. Right. And so that's where less is not more. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think it's hugely important as a franchisor that we still maintain to make sure that we're driving the business to our franchisees, because at the end of the day, the health of our franchisees is the most important. And to ensure that they're making money, and we're providing the services that they, and providing them opportunities like the housekeeping, you know, on demand, the bag, the grab and go. Those are ideas that again, the franchisor are helping the franchisee to ensure their financial success.
I love that. And I do think consumer preferences will change, right? I mean, so we had some expectations about travel a year and a half ago, and just because of the way we've been living for the last year, you know, you add another year to that, and I think we'll all be very comfortable with like grabbing your prepackaged breakfast, and you want to see it wrapped because then you know no one touched it before you did, right? So it's funny how your expectations start changing. But one of the things that we're able to do in our model, because we own such a large number of properties, is so as we're making changes, right, because you're talking about which standards are likely to be evolved over time. And we are thinking, when we look at our standards, we're looking at our standards not only for our franchisees, but we're able to really test the effect of the changes that we're making across a number of different hotels in different markets, right? So for us, that has actually been very helpful. I think for our franchisees, it's very beneficial. Because when we're saying certain types of changes need to be made, we understand the financial impact, you know, that if we're saying that you need to spend in this area, like you might have to buy more cleaning supplies, we understand that the implications of making that change on a dollars and cents, you know, from a dollars and cents perspective, but we can point to why we think that's the right change to make, right? So David talked about sales and distribution. Those are really important places to make sure that you're continuing to service your franchisees, but even helping them to see that you don't want to cut everything. You want to cut the right things, and you want to keep, you may want to make some investments in some areas that you didn't prior. You may, even as a supplier, there maybe have been some things you were supplying before that now you should think, I might want to add some sanitizer to the vending machines, right? Because everyone wants to have access to that.
Yeah.
So we just have to start thinking differently about what consumers want, and then, and because I really think a lot of these adaptations will be here for a while, if not for, you know, until the next whatever.
Yes, exactly.
That we can't predict.
You know, I just thought about PPE early on in the pandemic. a number of folks reached out to me here at IFA, but also some of my colleagues. How did you both handle PPE with your franchisees? Did you provide them with vendors? Did you have vendors that were able to, quickly kind of change their business model to provide PPE for your franchisee? Just curious, only because it was a very big to a certain extent, but would love to just, whoever wants to, chime in, would love to hear what your franchisees are still doing and did early on, and how you both handled it.
Yeah, I think at the very beginning there were some supply constraints, right? I mean, it was hard. Everybody wanted gloves, everybody wanted masks, and it was in numbers that were just simply almost unsustainable. So, I mean, I think we were able to do a good job of, tapping into some of our other resources or owners to be able to access the pipeline. But now I think things have leveled out pretty well. I mean, I think even for us, if you want to buy gloves, you can get them pretty easily. But there was definitely a time at the very beginning where it was really challenging, I think, to get all the things that the CDC was saying were required, right? And even those requirements changed over time. And so we just did the best that we could, right, under the circumstances.
Yeah, and look, the vendor community was terrific. I mean, they pivoted really quickly and worked with all the franchisors, I think, and to help supply our franchisees with these resources. It was difficult in the beginning. It was A, what do you want them to have? B, how much do you want to mandate? Because each state was different, and you also, you got your franchisor laws that you didn't want to tell them how to operate the hotel. And it was hard for the front line too, for our associates that were out there, requiring people didn't want to wear masks or things like that. It was a really tough road in the beginning. The quicker we can get through this, the better for everybody.
Yeah. And the one thing we did is
Exactly.
we tried not to mandate, I think if you could really help franchisees to see what's in it for them, I think they can get behind it pretty quickly, right? I mean, the litigation landscape was so unpredictable at the beginning, and usually those things come back, right? Hindsight is 2020, but you don't see the litigation until well into the future. And so we really just try to emphasize the importance to them of making sure that they made these investments in PPE and things that would protect their team members, and because ultimately it would protect them and their business in the end.
Excellent. And that's kind of a good segue into the next question. What do you foresee derailing any of the expectations you all have for 2021, and what are you doing to kind of mitigate these thoughts?
I think myself, I think most people in the hotel segment, we feel pretty good, right? There's some light at the end of the tunnel. We're seeing the travel pick up, right? Sure, you would love to have more business travel. Again, the big convention hotels are going to be the last ones that are really going to see the real light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, until you can get those 2,000 person conventions back in and people attending, and that helps everybody, because that helps with compression in those markets, raises the rates for everybody. And so we're still looking. So that's one of the things we're still looking for. We want that to pick back up. Look, another variant, if we get sent back in again, back into our homes and back into non-travel is our concern. Hopefully these vaccines are working, and we're going to be fine with that. I still think there's still a little chatter. I'm still trying to figure out about these passports.
I know. Yeah, exactly.
Because the other thing we do need is, you look at like a New York City, you look at these gateway cities, you need international travel back.
Yeah.
And that makes a big piece of New York City and San Francisco and LA. And so you want those things. But things are still looking really good. On the growth side, the concern right now is labor and materials, right? Lumber has never been, as expensive as it is today. Getting subs to get in there and finish jobs is, it's still, there's a lot of need there as well. So those would be my only kind of concerns that are out there. But again, I think people are seeing, they've got a story. People they're looking at building hotels again because they know by the time they open up in a year or two, we're going to be out of this pandemic and they're going to be opening up in a real, upswing. And so we're feeling really positive about what's going on going forward. Those are just things that, those are the little things that I guess would kind of diminish my day a bit. But.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think David hit the nail on the head earlier when he talked about the labor challenges,
Yes.
especially around the stimulus checks, right? So those don't expire until September, and I think that really has put a lot of pressure on wages in our industry. The minimum wage challenges that are potentially on the horizon. I think if hotels open up and they have to operate, you need people to work in the hotel. So I think that will continue to be a challenge. And as we talk about returning value to owners, higher wages will put some downward pressure on their bottom line. So I think that's one thing. The lawyer in me is always concerned about the litigation landscape, right? So and that can derail you really, really quickly. And unfortunately, the plaintiff's bar is just always alive and well. And I think we are, you're seeing this year a lot of the litigation fallout from the cruise ships, right? That was sort of at the very tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us learned really fast and furious, right, what not to do and what to do as we moved into the pandemic. But those lawyers haven't yet decided what cases they want to bring. And so I think seeing how that plays out, toward the end of the year or as we get back to normal, I think is another thing. And the last one is, the vaccine. So, I think we see a lot of numbers about vaccines getting into people's arms, which is really good and encouraging for travel. But I saw just recently that Vegas is thinking about mandating employers providing vaccines to, the casinos, right? Requiring vaccines for their employees. And that's because people don't want to get the vaccines. So I still think that even though we hear the headlines about, I think it was 4 million people vaccinated today, which is very encouraging, the folks who really need vaccines, if they're going to be working on the front lines, are still really reticent. And I think that coupled with the, the unemployment, I think it creates a real challenge that we have to figure out.
Yeah, and then we have to talk about the government, right? Which is, I'll let Alma talk about.
I left that for you.
Yeah,
I'll leave the
that was my
lawyer.
next point. So thank you. Perfect. You read my mind, both of you. I was going to mention. I'll let you say ProAct, please.
You both are the ProAct. I'll let you talk about the destruction that that can do to all of our businesses here, and the real concern. On the flip side is, an infrastructure bill, which will not only create jobs and create, people will now have money in their pocket to go out and travel, but just the training and the people that are going to be out there building roads or building highways or building, airports. I mean, that creates crews and that creates more people at hotels. So and then helps travel, with better airports and better roads and bridges. So, I mean, if we get an infrastructure bill, it's fantastic for the hotel segment. I mean, not only is going to create jobs, it's going to create, people, will want to travel because they're going to have more dollars in their pocket, but it's also going to make it easier to travel as well.
I agree.
And Alma can talk about it.
I want to end on that high note. I don't.
Yeah, that's it.
The only thing I would add is I actually think it's really true. I mean, the infrastructure bill is really encouraging. We know IFA just, circulated an email just yesterday, I think, talking about some of the language, some of the language that is included in that, in the first drafts that we've seen, which is challenging. And look, I want to try to, put a positive spin on this, which is, look, I understand legislators have a job to do and they have to legislate and they've got to, they're thinking about worker safety and worker protection. And I think, we can do that without throwing out the baby and the bathwater, right? We know franchising is a really good model. It's a way to keep the engines of the economy flowing. It's a way for new businesses to open without a whole lot of risk. And with support and with guidance and with people who can, help them to navigate the environment. So, I think it's really important for us to get that story out there and make sure that we are, preserving what works, right, in the economy and what works in the model. And if there are things that we can do to help, protect our workers, a rising tide lifts all boats. We're all for that. So that's what I'm hoping, that even if language like that ends up in the infrastructure bill, it's language that preserves franchising, right? Because it is an important business model, and I cut my teeth on it, and I want it to be here. So.
Yeah. And Paul,
well said.
Yeah, Paul, you said it earlier, where like people just don't understand franchising, and unfortunately, it's a lot of our representatives and senators that don't understand franchising. And the IFA has done a great job getting information out to our association, to send letters to the chief of staffs of these people to get the word out about what this can do to the franchising model. And I'm on the board of the IFA, and I know we talk about all the time of getting that story out of. We create opportunities. We're the ones that are creating, these are the small business people. It's not us that, the franchisor that own all these hotels or all the restaurants. It's the individual owners that do. And we're creating the small business owner that is out there. And the last thing you want to do is to destroy the small business owner.
Exactly.
They're the job creators.
Yeah, I love that. And, the other thing is, again, another sort of like pandemic consequence is people have really, I think I derive more comfort from a brand that I know, right? And I think in this environment also, that's another thing that franchising has helped with, right? It's allowed small businesses to stay alive, but deliver services that people can trust and people feel comfortable with, so that the economy can continue to operate. So there's just so many good things about the model that we really just have to think about how we preserve it, while addressing the concerns that are, definitely legitimate.
No, I could not agree with you both more, 100%. I mean, the business format franchise model helps people realize the American dream, just plain and simple. It's just wonderful. So on that note, I'd like to actually, because we have a few minutes left, we do have a couple of questions I'd like to jump into. First question, what steps are you taking to ensure franchisees that need financing get the help they need? Are lenders more cautious with lodging brands? Now, I know you both kind of touched on this already, but maybe if you want to just reiterate that, and I'll just open it up to whoever wants to start off.
Yeah.
David's the development guy.
Yeah. Thanks. We used to team together to get all this stuff done.
I was going to say, you get the legal, the development side's perfect,
There you go.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect.
look, I mean, we're all franchisors mostly on this call, I think. Look, item 19s don't look very good this year. That everybody just filed, for their new FDDs. And so it really is. It's things that we talked about, like, as much as people don't understand franchising, people don't understand certain segments of the hotel space. Not all are created equal. Where we were down when we last announced, our earnings, we were down 28%, RevPAR versus the year before, where other brands are down 50, 60%. So they're all not created. Like this mid-scale and below did not get hurt as bad. We're also seeing the return of the leisure traveler, and that we're going to be back to our 2019 levels way before the other segments are. I mean, if not this year or next year. But it's coming quickly. So educating the lender and having the franchisor help you educate the lender is always a benefit. Again, it's companies like us that are public. It's out there. It's you can see the brand performances. You can see our segments, how they performed, and taking that information. And again, why franchising works. you can see how our segments outperformed, and it's public information to go help you out and get financing out there. So
excellent. Thank you. Ahmed, did you have anything you wanted to add to that, or?
No, I think that was great. We're not public, but we do have FDDs, and a lot of our information, our FDDs, reflect the performance of our owned hotels. So, and the story is there. It is a good story. Our brands have outperformed this segment, and have really done remarkably well through the downturn.
Wonderful. And I'd like to take this opportunity. I always like to plug our supplier members. We have a number of supplier members in the finance space. So please go to franchise.org and you can find them all there, or you could always reach out to me directly as well. And I'd be happy to assist any of you. So next question. Since businesses have realized they can successfully operate with reduced business travel during the pandemic, do you think after recovery there may be diminished demand for in-person business interaction? If so, how is your company responding? Looks like it was truncated. How is your company responding to this development? Good question.
So I think it's a good question, but I think it's I think it's going to be a journey back, right? But I think while businesses have recognized that they can operate without everyone being in the office, there have been some unintended consequences too, right? Like, so we were talking about this before we went live. I mean, businesses are now looking at the burnout that comes from just sitting in front of the computer all day, every day. And so creating some opportunities. I think you are going to see the workforce be more of a hybrid. I don't know that we're ever going to 100% get back into the office, but there are some businesses that have doubled down on office investments, believing that the office will come back, right? So I think it'll be varied for companies, but at some point, even if we're all at home, we are going to want to meet people. We are going to want to see people again, and in person. And even for businesses that have opted not to bring everyone back into the office, there's a certain amount of collaboration that happens in person. There's a certain amount of just camaraderie that happens in person. You just can't get that over a Zoom call. It was cute for the first few months, but you just want to say cheers with your glass, right? So I think a certain amount of this will come back. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah. I think Bill Gates's quote of 50% of business travel will never return is 100% wrong.
I agree.
I think, look, now will it come fully back? It's going to take some time. I mean, companies have invested in Zoom. They've invested in things that that you can do work from home. It may not be you're in the office 5 days a week. It might be 3 days a week, things like that. But in regards to business travel, look, I agree. You can't, when everybody's on this, it works. When a couple people are on it and not everybody else, it doesn't work. When there is a meeting in a conference room and you're on Zoom, it's hard. And when people start going back into the office, they're not going to want to miss that meeting. And so I think I think this, lack of, will business travel diminish? I think is completely overblown. I also think that, people want the creativity, they want the brainstorming. We need to get back in the office. I mean, I feel for the younger associates that don't have the mentoring that's going on, the conversations that they, how a meeting went, things like that. People are going to miss that. So I think you're seeing a big push of people going back into the office. In regards to travel, I've started traveling it. The faces of our customers when you show up to go see them, how happy they are and how happy I am. To see people is incredible. And so, again, this works when everybody's on it. It works.
Yes.
Not everybody's going to be on it, and when that does, I think this falters a bit for us. I see travel coming back.
And I think you also touched on something important with, because I have a college, when my daughter's a sophomore in college, but even as you start thinking about the next generation of workers, they can't all do internships via Zoom. like,
Exactly.
right? And then get into companies. At some point, we have to be able to bring people back, face to face. So I think it's just a matter of time, for sure.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Well, listen, on that note, I cannot thank you both enough. Ahmed, David, excellent, really good, content, and thank you for, for being, the thought leaders that you are. And thank you everybody for participating today. Really appreciate it, and we appreciate your time. And just to remind everybody, we did record today's webinar, and it will be made available later this evening on IFA's microsite, community.franchise.org. And that's where you could also view past specific, franchise sector related webinars, and even see a list of the upcoming specific sector webinars as well. So on that note, again, thank you all for joining us today. And Amin, David, I cannot thank you enough. Just excellent information. I learned a lot. So again, thank you both. And thanks everybody for joining us today. I hope you all found it helpful and useful as much as I did. So on that note, thank you both.
Thanks for having us.
Take care, everybody. Enjoy. Bye now.
Bye.